Good morning. Good morning on this lovely day to honor Father's Day and Juneteenth. My name is Jacqueline Kairis, and I'm serving as the worship associate this morning. It's good to be with you. On behalf of First Unitarian Church of Wilmington, I welcome you to our service here in the sanctuary, as well as streaming online. We are a welcoming congregation, which means we welcome you completely. Arrive as your full self. Feel safe. Feel comfortable and welcomed and accepted. No matter your identity, your race, no matter your emotions today, no matter where you are on your faith journey, you are welcome here. If you are new to First U and would like to learn more, please check out our website at firstuuwilm.org. And now, let us prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
Thank you for that beautiful music to begin our worship. We're welcoming today to play the piano, Hiroko Yamazaki. Appreciate your being here. I'm the Reverend Larry Piers, minister here at First Unitarian Church of Wilmington. Have you noticed I've already started moving towards my summer vacation? I don't have the robe on today, and I think I'll just remove one article each week. So it's great to be with you and to enjoy the beauty of this day and the beauty of each other's presence. As we gather in worship today, let us recall these ancient words from the Psalm 30, which proclaims, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning." We live in the promise of this verse from the Psalm, knowing in our own lives and in the life of this country that we endure, and sometimes we do indeed transcend. In declaring this national holiday of Juneteenth, our neighbor, Joe Biden, offered these words in a proclamation. Juneteenth marks the long, hard night of slavery and the discrimination and the promise of a brighter morning to come. Nearly 9 decades after our nation's founding, and more than 2 years after President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, enslaved Americans in Galveston, Texas, finally received word that they were free from bondage. As those who were formerly enslaved were recognized for the first time as citizens, as Black Americans came to commemorate Juneteenth with celebrations across the country, building new lives and a new tradition that we honor today. Juneteenth is a day of profound weight and power. A day in which we remember the moral stain and terrible toll of slavery on our country, what I've long called America's original sin, a long legacy of systemic racism, inequality, and inhumanity. But Biden continues, it is a day that also reminds us of our incredible capacity to heal, hope, and emerge from our darkest moments with purpose and resolve. So on Juneteenth, we recommit ourselves to the work of equity, equality, and justice, and we celebrate the centuries of struggle, courage, and hope that have brought us to this time. And we know there is still more work to do.
If you have a chalice at home, I invite you to join us by lighting it while I read these words adapted by Oberlin Fellowship. We light this chalice to find inner peace, love for each other and all living creatures, and to renew faith in ourselves. Please rise in body or in spirit to sing hymn number 21, For the Beauty of this Earth. after you. Please join us in affirming our mission. First Unitarian Church of Wilmington is a beloved community that nourishes minds and spirits, fights injustice, and transforms the world through loving action.
As we enter this time of prayerful meditation, let's find ourselves being held by the seat that we're sitting on. Let's find maybe even our feet upon the ground. Let's find a stillness within us and around us so that we might be able to turn inward together. As we enter this time of prayerful meditation, I want to offer these words from Parker Palmer as a way for us to imagine ourselves and imagine sitting within ourselves in this moment. Parker writes, "The soul is like a wild animal, tough, resilient, savvy, and self-sufficient, yet exceedingly shy. If we want to see a wild animal, the last thing we should do is to go crashing through the woods, shouting for the creature to come out. But if we are willing to walk quietly into the woods and sit silently like we are doing now in this moment, if we are able to sit silently at the base of a tree, the creature we are waiting for may well emerge. And out of the corner of an eye, we will catch a glimpse of the precious wildness that we seek. And out of the corner of our eye, we might encounter some glimpse of our own soul. Let's continue this time of meditation in a time of shared silence, following which we will have an opportunity to share the prayers and concerns that are on our own heart this morning. Let's join together now in a time of shared silence. When we gather each Sunday together, we bring with us a combination of sorrows and joys. Sorrows that we feel may weigh us down, and joys that may lift us up. So let's take a moment now to share some of those sorrows, or at least attend to the sorrows in our own heart, and also to share some of those joys, or allow those joys to lighten our spirits. I'm so aware of two sorrows, one of which is that John Claney's father died this past week. So we hold him and surround him with our caring love and compassion. And Deb Griffin's sister also died this past week. What are the sorrows that you have in your heart? And if you want to speak them aloud in this room or write them in the chat, you may do so now. May we not feel alone in these sorrows, as we also take a moment now to share whatever joys we may have in our heart with one another. Okay. And so the joys that we feel, we don't also have to hold just to our own self. We can share them and allow them to lighten each other's spirit as well. May all the names that were spoken, those unspoken, find peace and healing this day. Let's join together now as we hear our musical meditation.
Today's reading is adapted from Church of the Wild by Victoria Lours. There is a story about a land where the trees talk and the waters croon and the people fall in love with the birds who love them back. There is a story about an enchanted forest hiding in plain sight, invisible until somehow the veil drops and what was unseen can suddenly be seen. You may catch a glimpse when you cross the threshold on the far edge of the abandoned fields, or when, just for a blinking instant, you notice how the brambles of the blackberry bush connect you to everything. The ancestors knew this and reminded one another around their fires that they belonged to a great web of life. Once upon a time, all humans knew their lives, their food, their survival, their sense of meaning and kinship with God or gods was connected with all their relations, with hawks and soil and ferns and mosquitoes. Like all wild creatures, they belonged to the land, and they knew it. They were untamed and self-willed and listened to their own intimate authority. They were part of a grand conversation, a relationship of reciprocity and respect, connecting with all other beings and elements of life. But there came a time when some of the people could no longer hear the conversation. An elixir fell over the poppy fields, causing them to fall asleep. The wax in their ears became hardened, and their hearts pretended that they were happier controlling the world rather than loving it. They rushed right past burning bushes on the way to importance, missing the message of the doe hiding in plain sight with her newborn fawn. They packed the bodies of sacred forest cathedrals onto trucks and shipped them to mills. They forgot that the thrush song spelled out warnings and wisdom in octaves. Disconnected little by little, their voices went missing in the symphony of aliveness. The songs of the wild God, cascading through the trees, no longer guided their lives, and a deep loneliness sunk down upon the people like a heavy fog nobody could see. The time has come to lift that veil of fog and return to the intimate relationship with the living world. More and more of us are taking our place once again as full participants in the web of life, which we remember is held together by love. There are no magic words to incant, no spiritual laws to memorize. You simply need to learn how to listen. And allow your heart to be broken, just like every time you fall in love. Because the holy is your place, too.
Thank you, Jackie. Perhaps you too have remembered or imagined, as Victoria Lours does in this reading from the Church of the Wild, that it wasn't always the case that we felt so distant or exploitive in our relationship with nature. Perhaps there is a part of you that senses or even remembers that we are or were, as she says, part of a grand conversation, a relationship of reciprocity and respect, connecting with all other beings and elements of life. Perhaps you have had a direct experience of the sacred within the natural world that animates a knowing in you that is not so easily dismissed or forgotten. That's my hope for us. Victoria Lours was one of those who eventually remembered. Lours was called back into that grand conversation with all other beings and elements of life after she was burned out from being a pastor in a congregation. And then after she entered fully into climate justice work around the country, she burned out again. She confesses, I quote her, "I spent a dozen years as a nonprofit leader in the climate movement where spiritual transformation meant something more like engaging faith communities in the campaign of the moment. But it rarely meant developing a new way of life, directed by a spirituality that deepened relationship with the land and the waters and the species we were seeking to protect." Hers was a hunger for a deepening of relationship within nature and not just in advocating for it. She could not feel sustained or fulfilled in her work unless she also restored her conversation with nature that guides her life work now as a director of the Wild Church Network, which is an intentional movement for helping congregations, the spiritual but not religious or just plain curious, find ways for nature to invite them back into the sacred. You may have noticed that twice now I've been using the phrase within nature rather than in nature. I'm trying to convey that when saying in nature, we can sometimes feel an unnecessary separation. We're here. When we are in nature, we are over there somewhere. I'm attempting to convey by saying within nature that we are always within nature and nature is always within us. And our separation is only in our language and in the story that we tell. So today's reflection is not about getting back to nature. It is about recognizing the deep connection that we already have, though the story we tell is often one of separation, rather than about our conversation or our ongoing relationship with nature. The recent emergence of eco-psychology and eco-spirituality help us to find a different story that understands that at the root of our contributions to the climate emergency is how we see ourselves within nature or not. Bill Plotkin, an ecotherapist, in his book, Nature and the Human Soul, understands human development and our own healing as, and I quote, built on the inherent soul connections we humans have with nature. Inherent because our souls as well as our bodies are part of nature. He says that all of us are born to occupy a particular place in nature, a place in the earth community, a unique ecological role, a singular way that you can serve and nurture the web of life, as unique as that of any birch, bear, or beaver pond. Our climate emergency is causing us to reconsider the stories that we have been told about our relationship within nature because we recognize all too clearly now the cost. Our dominant story, one that our Western religion has over perpetuated perpetuated on us and our earth. Our dominant religious mythologies tell the story that we've been expelled from a paradise and that we will return to a paradise in the next world. Our dominant religious mythologies tell the story of being separate from the earth, which we therefore exploit and consume for our own ends. Some claim that the stories that have been recounted over time by untold numbers of Jews, Christians, and Muslims set values that, when acted upon, led finally to the degradation of the non-human world. Whether that is true or not, there's a lot of constructive theological work being done right now in each of these religions to discover alternate stories that put us more in a rightful relationship within nature and perhaps can lead us to right action. The deep ecologist, systems thinker, Buddhist scholar, and activist Joanna Macy, who I'm sure some of you have heard of, makes the point that often in religious traditions we have a mistaken identity, and our awakening is to recognize who we really are. Nowhere is this more apparent, Macy argues, than in our mistaken identity about ourselves and nature in our Western culture. She says that we've been thinking that we were consumers and that we were laborers in the machines of the industrial growth society. We've been thinking that we'd better get ahead as separate selves, win, and look out for number one. In fact, she declares, we have all along been imprisoned in this shrunken sense of self. This shrunken sense of self has been reinforced by some of the religious stories, and in turn, those stories have led us to enact these narratives upon the earth. Macy proposes that the climate crisis is actually a wake-up call for us. It has the potential of being an awakening to a new story, an understanding of ourselves as actually being life on earth, of being living members of a living planet. We are, Macy proclaims, like cells in a living body of the earth. We are like cells in the living body of the earth. Take in that image now. Sense what it means to have that understanding of ourselves as not separate, but as part of one body, the earth. Consequently, it's not just the earth that is being traumatized. We are being traumatized in this climate emergency. From this perspective, our care for the earth is in actuality a caring that can reground in us our interconnectedness with all of life and our interexistence with all of life. So again, it's not as if nature's over there and we're over here. In actuality, we are within nature. Now, I first encountered Joanna Macy when, as a relatively new minister, I went to a national conference on religion and the environment in Washington, D.C. in the late 1980s, or maybe it was the early 1990s. And one of the workshops I went to was being led by Macy, and it was held on the grounds of the National Cathedral. Now, I do mean the ground of the National Cathedral. For there we were, gathered under some trees, while we lay on the ground and were guided through an experiential process of imagining our evolutionary journey of 4.5 billion years of life on the earth. In the workshop, we moved from the imagined primordial soup to some different life forms, each of us taking on a different form. Imagine it, grown adults, nosing and crawling and wriggling and pushing up. We imaginatively feel our way into the inner body sense of being fish or amphibians, or reptiles, and then into becoming various life forms as we reenacted the evolution of life on Earth. Can you imagine it? Can you see it? The impact was to have us actually identify with all of life, to recognize that every atom in our body existed before organic life emerged. And in an experiential way, we remembered our childhood, so to speak, as minerals, as lava, as rocks. In the experience, participants were also invited to let themselves be chosen by another life form, be it animal or plant or a natural feature like a swamp or a desert. And eventually, in the process, we were invited to speak as that different being to one another in what was called a council of all beings. For example, someone might speak as a lichen and say, as lichen, I turned rock into soil. I worked as the glaciers retreated, as other life forms came and went. I thought nothing could stop my work, but now I am being poisoned by acid rain. You get the idea? So, perhaps you had to be there. I often get teased by my spouse when I come home after some workshop experiences that I've had and describe them. I don't always share them, but we know each other, and I knew you could hear this today. But this particular experience actually did have a lingering impact on me. There was no way I could leave the event without a deeper recognition of our connection with all of life, and subsequently our responsibility for all of life. Enacting that story of evolving life on this planet, becoming a council of all beings, was living into a new understanding of what it means to be human and within nature. It was an actual experience of a new story in which we were each a player, an actor, a part of that story. Perhaps Thomas Berry gives a kind of a rationale for the experience that I just described. Thomas Berry, who was also a scholar of the world's religions, especially Asian traditions, studied Earth history and evolution, and he called himself a geologian. He wrote that we need a new spirituality that, and I quote, emerges out of a reality deeper than ourselves, a spirituality that is as deep as the earth process itself, a spirituality born out of the solar system and even out of the heavens beyond the solar system, for it is in the stars that the primordial elements take shape in both their physical and psychic aspects. Out of these elements, the solar system and the earth took shape, and out of the earth, ourselves. As someone who grew up in the Christian tradition in the West, Thomas Berry also recognized that our old story is no longer effective. Yet we have not learned the new story. We're talking only to ourselves. We're not talking to the rivers. We are not listening to the wind and the stars. We have broken the great conversation. In this emerging field of eco-spirituality, there's a growing understanding that the interrelationships between all living beings on Earth and their interdependency, while appreciating their value for maintaining eco-balance, is what it's about for us. Now, eco-spirituality makes no sense without practices that help us to intentionally and regularly enter into what Victoria Loers calls wild contemplation. She invites us into practices that can lead us, or better yet, help us recover a new story about our relationship with nature. She says when we are talking only to ourselves, we're not talking to the rivers, as Berry says. We're not listening to the wind and the stars, as Thomas Berry says. She claims that we've broken this great conversation with nature, and that we can restore, that if we can restore that conversation, we can restore our true understanding of who we are. Now, if you thought that experience that I described on the ground of the National Cathedral was just a little odd, admit it, some of you did, hang in while I describe this next experience to you. This is one I'm actually inviting you to do over the summer, if you choose to. Find time for being within nature. I know that will happen and does happen in different ways for all of us. Some of us will open the glass door to the garden right out of our apartment and have that space to be with nature. Some of us will go for walks on Mondays pretty regularly and enjoy those hikes. Some of us will just walk around our block or our neighborhood and enjoy what it is that we see. She says, first, honor this intentional time by setting some time apart, maybe by creating a threshold, whether it is as simple as stepping over a stick or crossing a bridge or entering onto a trail or opening that glass door to the garden that lies outside your door, so that you're signaling that you are intending to enter into an enchanted, alive relationship with nature and with your own soul. So you got the first step, like create a threshold, cross that threshold, enter that trail or that space for a time, set it apart. And then, she says, wander. Allow yourself to be drawn to something, a river, the sun, shadows, or a breeze, or someone, a jay, blue jay, a bug, a tree that seems to be calling you. Just respond by opening your imagination, offering your full presence. Let go of any agenda or expectations of what will occur, and forget about what the neighbors will say. Allow yourself to honor this conversation that you are beginning with nature, with a bug, with a tree, with shadows, by giving yourself permission, and in a sense, asking permission to dwell with this tree or this bug or whatever. And then she suggests wonder. Become fully attentive. Listen closely. Use all of your senses. Notice little things. Listen. Observe. Enter tenderly into the relationship. And then ask questions of what it is that you're encountering. You don't have to ask the questions out loud for anyone else to observe. It could just be questions that you're asking within yourself of that encounter with that particular piece of nature that you're encountering. Let your curiosity be genuine. For example, you might ask the tree or the animal, "Tell me your story." Tell me about your joy. Tell me about your despair, your connection, or your disconnection. Following me still? Okay, good. Hang in there. So as you engage in this conversation, recognize that words sometimes don't work. You may try journaling or sketching, or just sitting in meditation. The important thing is to listen deeply, rather than just walking by. Allow yourself to saunter allow yourself to simmer in that place and in that moment with nature. Listen deeply, allowing images and emotions to arise. And you may share with this more than human other what you know also of your own joy, your own despair, your own connection, your own disconnection. You might reflect on what barriers block you from fully connecting with your place in the family of things. And then you might conclude with a time of gratitude. Lours says your full attention is actually a gift of gratitude. You may be the only human who paid full attention to the lizard or the tree or the plant that you encountered. And in that experience, gratitude arose. And the final step is one of return, crossing over your imaginary threshold once again, offering gratitude for the experience, capturing what the gift of this encounter has been for you. And then, if you dare do it, share the experience with a friend. Did he say share the experience with a friend? Yeah. So if you dare, share your experience of that conversation in nature with a friend. You might sketch or journal. You might come away with a particular insight or feeling or sensation. But share the experience with a trusted friend if you dare to do so. So this practice that Lours outlines of a contemplation of the wild may seem just as odd as me squirming on the grounds of the National Cathedral, pretending to be a jellyfish or whatever it was that I was. Yet this connection to nature as a source, as a potential source of connection to the sacred, is within our Unitarian Universalist tradition. After all, we affirm and promote in our Unitarian Universalist principles the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So why not have a little conversation with it now and then? One of our transcendentalist ancestors, Henry David Thoreau, engaged in such practices with nature. See, it's not that odd. Thoreau concluded that if God were to be found at all, it would not be after death, but here and now, and most probably in nature. Thoreau, in contrast with some of the dominant religious perspective of his time in New England, had what we might call a worldly spirituality that urges us to focus our attention on the here and now, on the ongoing revelations of the divine in nature and our own reflections on our inner life. Attending to our inner life and the ongoing revelations in the here and now could involve, as it did for many transcendentalists, writing, journaling, composing poetry, or sauntering walks in nature. I want to say something about sauntering. It comes from that French phrase, la sainte terre, the Holy Land. And so, for us to imagine that before us is this opportunity to step on holy ground, that right outside our own door, we might be invited in to recognize the holy that is already there, that surrounds us, and that is within us. Sauntering is this kind of reflective walking through nature where we make ourselves available to whatever revelations might come our way. So Thoreau practiced sauntering, a practice of walking slowly in nature and opening himself to his experience. The holy ground awaits us each day, each moment. So may it be.
Take off your shoes. This place you're standing, it's holy ground. Take off your shoes. The spot you're standing, it's holy ground. These words I heard in my burning bush. This place you're standing, it's holy ground. I heard my fiery voice speak to me. This spot you're standing, it's holy ground. That spot is holy, holy ground. That place you stand, it's holy ground. This place you tread, it's holy ground. God made this place his holy ground.
Thank you, Reverend Larry. And a couple of announcements. And the first is that Reverend Larry is going on vacation starting July 1st. So well deserved. Thank you, thank you. And good news. Good news for Reverend Larry resting, and good news for us that over the summer we have some wonderful programming planned. Some of it is our fellow congregants that are experts in their fields willing to share with us, so I'm really excited about that. If you want to learn more, check out the website, firstuuwilm.org. You'll also see it in your e-news. It comes each Friday. And then if you don't get those, you can surely call the church office. Here at First Unitarian, I always feel comforted and as well sometimes challenged. The result is feeling energized to share as much as I can in time, talent, and treasure. This place stays charged, is fueled by our volunteerism and our generosity. Today, as a reminder, I'm going to remind you of our donation baskets. And I'll just meet Lois. Lois. I thought by example. Thank you. Okay. A reminder of our baskets. So I'll admit to you that I have a bit of a guilty pleasure. I like to go to coffee shops and have someone else make my coffee, just now and then, tea, coffee. And I do think about when I leave, I think about a tip. You may think about that too when you go to a restaurant or a coffee shop. So those donation baskets, maybe we could think of that as a tip. And the baskets, by the way, are in the back of the sanctuary. There's a table on the right and a table on the left with signs. There are options beyond baskets. During the music, there will be projected on the screen ways to maintain this beautiful, welcoming, enriching place and people we call First Unitarian Church of Wilmington. And now, please join me in dedicating our offering to the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Please join us in extinguishing your chalice as I say these words by Thich Nhat Hanh, reminding just of us to stay in present and within nature. We can practice right now as you come into your breathing and we say, I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out.
So if you're visiting us today, you'll discover that we have a warm, welcoming congregation, people who are willing to find out a little bit about you and have you ask them any question you'd love to ask them, to get to know them as well. We gather in the parish hall back there, and we have a welcome table with some literature about our congregation. So make sure you take a moment following the final hymn to connect with one another and to also particularly connect with anyone who you think is a newcomer, even if they aren't. Next Sunday, or I should say this week, many of us Unitarian Universalists are gathering in Pittsburgh for our annual General Assembly. Next Sunday, you have the opportunity to participate in the worship service from the General Assembly. And those who would like to can gather here in the sanctuary. We'll show it on our screen. The service is at 11, so at 10:30 you can come and have some coffee and tea and some refreshments, particularly if you bring those refreshments with you. So please join with others. We'll also send out the link to the service if you'd prefer to watch it from home. But it's a wonderful opportunity to join with thousands of Unitarian Universalists from around the country for a time of worship. May this summer be a time where you find some time for sauntering. Let's say that word with 7 syllables. Sauntering. Now let's say it with 15 syllables. Sauntering. Great. So may you find that kind of time. Remember, I think it was Tolkien that said, all who wander are not lost. So take some time to wander this summer. As Jacqueline already mentioned, we have a wonderful array of summer services, and I'm going to try not to jump up and down with too much excitement. We have a live stream summer camp for adults with family-friendly activities starting on Sunday, August 13th, and going through the 15th. So I will see you there and hope that we'll use that as an opportunity to regather and also to connect with one another, and also find time to invite friends to join us on that Sunday. So our benediction comes from Thich Nhat Hanh. The beauty of the earth is a bell of mindfulness. If you can't see it, you must ask yourself why. Maybe something is blocking the way. Or maybe you are so busy looking for something else, you can't hear the call of the earth. Let's join together and sing our final hymn, For the Earth Forever Turning, number 163.
Thank